Great Debaters Contest is brought to you by Safaricom M-Pesa.
Welcome to the nation's capital. We have an epic debate in store for you today. This is the Great Debaters Contest. I am your host, Mariam Bishar.
And I am Austin Yumbok. Our motion today is climate change is the single greatest threat to sustainable development in Africa. We have Light Academy and Huruma Girls, who will be the victor.
First proposer, you can take the stage. You have 3 minutes.
Just like Martin Luther, I have a dream. A dream that one day we as Africans will come to realize that even though we play no significant role in climate change and global warming, about 10%, we are the greatest victims of this menace. And the words of Lupita Nyong'o, that no matter where you come from, your dreams are still valid, are the reason as to why I have the zeal and enthusiasm I have today to propose the motion that states climate change is the greatest single threat to sustainable development in Africa. My name is Elvis Muthui. I'm from Light Academy. It is a great mistake to assume that climate change is not the greatest menace because the very existence of human life is dependent on climate change. According to a research by the United Nations Environmental Programme, the current climate change will render African nations economically impaired. You may be asking why, and this is why you listen closely. Agriculture and food security depend on climate. Therefore, with an alarming rate of climate change, prospects are that by 2050, 4.5 million Africans will risk hunger and starvation due to climate change. In the recent past, between 2011 and 2013, there have been starvation and famine in Ethiopia and Somalia. Our sole source of development is mainly based in the agricultural sector, which is at the risk of impairment with climate change. Without food, both for local consumption and for export, we cannot say that we have an assurance for a sustainable future for generations to come. In another survey by the Global Climate Observing System, the rates of global warming are melting icebergs in the poles, resulting to an increase in seawater levels. What does this do? This submerges islands and coastal features. This leads to submergence of our harbors, ports, which we rely upon for transport, sea transport for the matter. Therefore, if we have a growing population in Africa, it means we can no longer settle our people at the coastlines. We can no longer have areas of transport at the coast because our islands and harbors are submerged, rendering transport and settlement impaired. Just in 2011, the west coast of West Africa, the Elbete region, was succumbed to submergence, and people in slums had to be evacuated because of the rising levels of water. But this is just the beginning. But more is yet to come in the future. But we can't sit and watch. Let us end this hysteria and public negligence of matters. Climate change is my future. It is your future, your children's future, and Africa's future. This is no game, my audience. It is reality. Climate change is the single greatest threat to sustainable development in Africa. Thank you.
Opposition, you have 3 minutes to make your opening remarks.
I'm Victoria Masita, representing Huruma Girls, and I'm here to oppose the motion, climate change is the single greatest threat to sustainable development in Africa. Our opponents here spoke of having dreams. My dream is in relation to when we as Africans will stop making excuses for our own inefficiencies. Why we can't use climate change as the only scapegoat for why we're not progressing as a continent? We have a myriad of problems that are hindering us from progressing. Let's say corruption. The other day we had 5 cabinet secretaries asked to step down over corruption allegations. Ladies and gentlemen, people can accept corruption, that is bribery, in whichever climatical changes. Whether it is rainy or sunny, people can still take bribes. Ethnicity, we have experienced xenophobia attacks in Africa. Are we going to say that people started killing each other just because of climate? No. I beg to differ on that. And on illiteracy, as I stand here before you, ladies and gentlemen, I am a beneficiary of the Equity Wings to Fly program. Why? Because I come from a humble background. My parents couldn't afford to bring me to school, so I had to earn my way through my passing of exams in the primary school examination. I had to earn my way to the current school I am in. Will we say that my benefactors looked at the climatic conditions so that they could help me? No, that's a big no. Let us not use climate change to escape our other inadequacies as Africans. Let us surge forward to look for how we can escape our problems rather than looking for settling on one loophole, which is not even credible. Pro-climate or against climate? You know my choice. What is yours? I want to be part of an Africa that instead of running away from its problems, we actually sit down and solve our problems, not looking for scapegoats. I believe I'm part of the change. What is your take on that? Allow me also to add my voice to the raging debate that climatic change is the threat, single threat. By single, we're saying that it's the only threat. Where have we put political instability in this? Africans, we're settling on building, we're not settling our scores with one another as we should. We're of one race, one color. What can we do to escape our problems? Run away from them? We are supposed to sit down. Let us not dwell on factors like ethnicity, which will make us lag behind. And with that, I rest my case.
We'll hear cross-examinations now. Light Academy, you have 3 minutes.
First of all, good Lord. Then second of all, I'm Nasruddin Abdrashid. I hope you can hear me. Here to propose the motion that climate change, please bear this in mind, is the single greatest threat. Not the single threat, we didn't say that, they did. Is the single greatest threat to sustainable development in Africa. So, first of all, to statements made by the first opposer, she talked of us escaping from the problems. No, we are not. You are doing that. We are saying, let us first acknowledge the fact that climate change is here, that it is affecting us. She talked of illiteracy. Well, madam, I do not know how you expect somebody to sit in a class and read when he or she has no food and is starving. How do you expect to deal with illiteracy when you cannot deal with the fact that people have literally no food? That I leave for you to answer. Facts are things that actually are true, can be proven for you. To actual facts, climate change is actually affecting this great continent of ours. How do you ask? Consider the fact that water is now a huge problem in Africa. Water, that clear liquid, it's becoming so rare. Consider the case of Egypt, which literally depends on the River Nile for all its water uses. Well, the Nile is drying up. What is Egypt supposed to do? And why is it drying up? Because there is climate change. It isn't drying up because there is illiteracy or any other thing like that. It's drying up because of climate change. Do you still want to tell me that the longest river in Africa is drying up, not because of any other reason, but because of illiteracy and such things? No, it is drying up because of climate change. Sudan, Ethiopia, and Uganda, countries that also share the water of the River Nile, are all building dams to store more and more water because they know how precious it is. According to the World Peace Initiative, water wars is a very high chance for us in the future. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the point in history where we are going to be fighting and killing each other for water. Then another case in point, Chad, where the Lake Chad is now disappearing, according to a survey done by the United Nations Environmental Programme in 2010. An entire lake that can be seen from space is disappearing. Why? Because there is climate change. We will never go anywhere as long as people like them continue telling us that climate change is not an issue. Every single continent has now accepted the fact that climate change is against their very survival as humanity. We in Africa have a lot of problems, that I will agree, but adding climate change is giving us a death blow. Climate
is a beast, ladies and gentlemen, is a great beast, and we are poking holes at it. Well, at least they are. In conclusion, the more we start thinking backwards and stop looking at the major problem, climate change, the more we'll be stuck and the more people will die. Please keep that in mind. Thank you very much.
Huruma Girls, time for your cross-examination. You have 3 minutes.
I am Susan Mwangi, Huruma Girls High School. First of all, let us not blame poor levels of education on climate change. We cannot have the temerity to stand here and blame climate change to be the single threat to sustainable development in Africa. Why on earth are we ignoring challenges such as political instability? If a country is politically unstable per se, they will channel all their energy into the war instead of channeling their energy into more diverse and productive stuff, such as agriculture or into their industries. This will go a long way to improve their economic status, therefore promoting sustainable development in their countries and in Africa. We can also not say this forgetting insecurity. Most people are shying off from being entrepreneurs and from opening up their businesses because of the threat of robbery and of theft. So, if we're saying that there is insecurity in Africa, I mean, seriously, will you open up your business yet you know that it's going to be robbed? All the capital that you invested in this business will just go at a loss? Let me also add that religious persecution is also another threat to sustainable development in Africa. I mean, let us take Nigeria, for example. The Boko Haram have been massacring people day in, day out. And this the people who are supposed to be in the front line of sustainable development in Africa. And this the people who are supposed to work in our farms to produce food, to work in our industries, to produce the blue band you buy at the supermarket, the perfume you applied when you're coming here, isn't it? Also, poor infrastructure in Africa, such as the potholed roads we have, this make most areas inaccessible. I mean, there is no way you're going to expect improvement in an area such as Magadi, yet the roads leading there are inaccessible, they are potholed. I mean, they're not even, yes, they are potholed, as I said. Therefore, I greatly oppose this motion that climate change is the single threat to sustainable development in Africa. I mean, we have so many points arguing about this. I rest my case.
My name is Victor Kimondo. When I'm home, then I need to go meet my friends in town. My parents are not at home. So I can call them, then I tell them, send money to the shopkeeper, give me, then I go to town with it, instead of actually having to plan things in the morning.
Take part in the M Challenge by sending your short song, rap or poem about Safaricom M-Pesa on WhatsApp, and you could win 1,000 shillings in Safaricom airtime.
The proposers have been asked how positive climate change still hinders sustainable development, and the opposition have been asked what aside from climate change is causing us to not develop at the rate we're supposed to be developing. Proposer number 3, you have 3 minutes.
Wonderful questions do exactly deserve wonderful answers. I'm Mohammed Abdullahi representing Light Academy. I would answer the first question posed to my team by Divine from Riara. Divine, that is the name, market. Tell me any positive impact of climate change you have witnessed in your all years of existence since climate change has been a threat in Africa, even a single one. All we've seen is water stress, as we mentioned, agriculture being hampered, food security at threat, transport at threat, land settlements along the coast at threat. That is what climate change has given to Africa, Divine. Going forward, ladies and gentlemen, the first solution to a problem is acknowledging the problem, is acknowledging the existence of the problem. But this is what the opposition is doing. They live in denial. They do not want to acknowledge even the existence of climate change, negative climate change, if we assume climate change had any positive impact for that matter. Would you open up your business if people were dying of starvation, if people did not have food, if people did not even have settlements, if people could not move around? Would you open up your business? Would you be going to school to acquire education and claim that illiteracy is the problem facing Africa? Ladies and gentlemen, what the opposition has not done is simply understand the terms. Leave alone the understanding, the logical part of the motion, even the terms. This is how the motion is framed. Climate change is the single greatest threat to sustainable development in Africa. But all they've done is tell you how other factors that we do acknowledge are problems facing sustainable development, but they haven't told you how those are the single greatest threat to sustainable development in Africa. They talked of political instability. Who causes political instability? Poor leaders across Africa. Museveni, Pierre Nkurunziza of Burundi, Paul Kagame of Rwanda. But the very existence of these leaders, ladies and gentlemen, depends on climate. Without climate, they wouldn't have been there, because climate is nature, and without nature, we wouldn't have been there. So even the problem of poor leadership, even as much as we acknowledge it's a problem in Africa, we do not acknowledge it as the single greatest threat to sustainable development in Africa. Finally, energy will be hampered. Much of Africa depends on either fossil fuels or hydroelectric power. Water volumes in rivers are going down, lakes are drying up. We would not have energy in few years to come. Without energy, no industries, no employment, no tax, poor standards of living, poverty, death. Thank you.
Opposition, you have 3 minutes to respond to the audience.
Greetings to all. My name is Olivia Muguna from Huruma Girls. In answer to your question, it is through education that people develop their countries. People will learn the skills of how to manage harsh climatic conditions, if there is. I'd like to ask you a question now that I've answered yours. Per se, a rhetorical one. I don't need an answer, it's a food for thought. Look at what's happening around you. Look at what's happening in Africa. It beats me that you're more concerned with climate than the other issues. Firstly, there are less job opportunities. I'm being told every day, work hard, go to university and get a job. I don't get a job. I end up selling water with my degree. So you're still concerned with climate change? You are still concerned with climate change, and you dare stand here and ask me that, fine, it is true, I need the food so that it can give me energy to go back to class. But the judges also need the food to judge me on where I'm wrong. But let me ask, is food more important or education? How will I build my country? How will I build the country? Secondly, population growth. We find that in some developing countries, population growth is the center problem in economic development. Some developing countries in Africa have their population growth is in excess to the gross domestic product growth rate, which is negative to their development. You'll find that maybe in a region there are more people, limited resources, which will lead to overexploitation of those resources. And another thing, we have strikes. Look at Kenya. Doctors strike, teachers strike. I've never had a climatologist strike, demanding for, we need our pay. They don't do that. Doctors, teachers, yes, they deserve their pay, But then they also want to see the development in their institutions. They want to see them grow, not just climate. We, Africa, are experiencing many problems just apart from these climate issues that we have. If we concentrate on the climate, then what of the other issues? Let's say insecurity for now, as my fellow opposer said. So you're going to concentrate more on that climate change than the insecurity. You'd rather be attacked and then you concentrate on the weather? Really? I rest my case.
We'll now hear closing submissions. Proposers, you have 1 minute.
I'll borrow a quote from Judge Booker. Siasa mbaya, maisha mbaya. A common rhetoric, as she mentioned during the KANU time. But now I'll change it. Climate mbaya, maisha mbaya. Unfortunately, I do not know the Swahili word for climate. Pardon me. Loosely translated as bad climate, bad life. Why are we concerned about the climate as they ask us? Because it's life. We are concerned about life. The very existence of humanity on earth. Ladies and gentlemen, let's be serious. God. Climate change is the single greatest threat to sustainable development in Africa. When the climate goes wrong, everything else goes wrong. From food production that majority of the African countries rely on, to water shortages across Africa, energy shortage, industries closing up, investors moving back to their countries, debts that we incur in search of food when our citizens die of hunger. Ladies and gentlemen, it's crystal clear that climate change is the single greatest threat to sustainable development in Africa.
Opposition, you also have a minute for your final submission.
Let me borrow something from Bill. You also have fault in your stars. Nelson Mandela tells us something through his words. Let this be the day to place your block in the building of a new Africa. An Africa that will be like the pride of those who built the pyramids. An Africa of great warriors. An Africa of great statesmen. An Africa of God's pride. When there's no development, I fall. When there's no development, we fail, we suffer. When there's development, together we grow. I rest my case.
Light Academy, Elvis, climate change, what is climate change actually? And what is sustainable development? As a debater, you begin from the definition of terms that wasn't forthcoming. At one point, you talked about, and if I quote you, islands and ports, I think, are submerging. And I said, fine. And you say, this is hampering transport. I said, okay. Now, my next question is, what is the link with sustainable development? How important possibly is water transport in boosting the economy of the country that you've mentioned? I think there was a bit of lack of link in the course of your presentation. And as a first debater, I believe you can do better. Rather, you should do better than that. Abdirashid, again, I think I began listening to you owing to the fact that Elvis did not really start us off very well. Nonetheless, you're a good debater, and I began following the debate from you. Mohammed, you are in a class of your own. You can make a first speaker, second speaker, third speaker. In simple terms, you can debate alone. But you see, the thing is this, we need 3 debaters, and each will be awarded a mark. In case I score you so highly, and the other team members, I don't score them highly, in a way, it may pull the team down. But you are somebody who really understood the motion, and I'm happy that you're able to clarify to the opponents what exactly they should have done. And I'm sorry that the opponents did not see the lead, the light actually, and try to correct themselves in those regards. So you can, the 2 teams, you can try to see what to improve on.
Huruma girls, there were 2 ways that you could have looked at that motion. Climate change is not the single greatest threat to sustainable development in Africa, and then point us to what, in your view, is the single greatest threat to sustainable development. The other way you could have looked at it is said that the issues that threaten sustainable development in Africa are varied. There are many. And so you go ahead and tell us what they are, which Susan does, but I think the challenge that we have is how you then connect these issues that you raise to sustainable development in Africa. You mentioned quite a number of them. Susan and Olivia also comes in to raise some more of those issues. But the link between those issues and sustainable development in Africa is lacking, which leads us back to the definition of terminology and contextualizing the words to the motion. If your first speakers don't do that, then the rest of you, end up being in this puzzle that you really don't know how to get yourself out of. And I guess that was the challenge that you had.
Huruma Girls, the judges awarded you with 63%. Please give them a round of applause, audience. Light Academy, the judges awarded you with 73.5%, making you the winners of this debate.
Congratulations to the two teams on stage, and we'd like to send our gratitude to Safaricom M-Pesa and KBC Channel 1, and urge members of the audience and also those viewers back home, follow us on Twitter at Great Debaters EA and all our social media platforms. I am Austin Nyambok.
And I am Mariam Bashar. Catch you next time.
The Great Debaters Contest was brought to you by Safaricom M-Pesa.